I've always believed that trust is the foundation of a marriage, the invisible thread that holds two people together through the chaos of life. For 16 years, I thought Clara and I had woven that thread into something unbreakable. We met in college, two kids barely out of their teens, fumbling through philosophy classes and late-night coffee runs. She was a whirlwind of energy, sharp-witted, with a laugh that could light up a room and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. I was quieter, steadier, the guy who planned the dates and remembered the anniversaries. We balanced each other, or so I thought. We built a life together in Portland, Oregon, a city that suited her vibrant spirit and my need for calm. I worked as a structural engineer, designing bridges and buildings, finding satisfaction in the precision of numbers and the permanence of steel. Clara was a freelance graphic designer, her work as colorful and unpredictable as she was. Our house, a modest craftsman with a wraparound porch, was filled with her art, bold abstracts on the walls, quirky ceramics on the shelves. We had two kids, Emma and Noah, who inherited her creativity and my stubborn streak. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I thought it was enough. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in early April, though I didn't recognize it as a crack at the time. I'd been working late on a project, a suspension bridge proposal that had me buried in calculations. Clara had been distant for weeks, but I chalked it up to her latest client, a demanding startup that kept her glued to her laptop. That night, I came home around 9, expecting to find her in her studio, headphones on, lost in a design. Instead, the house was quiet, the kids already in bed. Clara was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, her phone glowing on the counter. "You're late," she said, not looking up. Her tone wasn't accusatory, just flat, like she was stating a fact. "Bridge project," I said, dropping my bag by the door. "You know how it gets." She nodded, but her eyes stayed on her glass. I noticed her hair was down, loose curls spilling over her shoulders, and she was wearing a dress I hadn't seen before. A deep green thing that hugged her curves. It wasn't her usual yoga pants and paint-splattered hoodie. "You going somewhere?" I asked, half teasing. She froze for a split second, then smiled. "Just felt like dressing up. Been in sweats all week." I didn't think much of it then. Clara was spontaneous. It was one of the things I loved about her. She'd decide on a whim to dye her hair auburn or book a weekend trip to the coast. I figured the dress was just her shaking off the monotony. But that moment stuck with me, a pebble in my shoe I couldn't quite shake loose. Over the next few weeks, the pebbles multiplied. She started taking calls in the other room, her voice low and clipped. She'd leave for client meetings at odd hours, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her perfume lingering in the air. Once, I found her phone on the couch, screen unlocked, a text notification from someone named Evan. The message was innocuous, "See you at 7. But it was the timestamp that caught my eye. 10:43 p.m., sent 2 nights ago when she told me she was at a networking event. I didn't read more. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who snoops through his wife's phone. But the name Evan burrowed into my brain like a splinter. I tried to talk to her about it casually over dinner one night. The kids were at a sleepover and we were splitting a pizza, the kind with the weird toppings she loved, fig and prosciutto, her fancy phase, as she called it. "So," I said, keeping my tone light, "who's Evan? Saw his name pop up on your phone." Her fork paused midair, just for a second, before she laughed. "Oh, Evan? He's just a client. Runs a coffee shop downtown, wants a new logo." "Why?" "No reason," I said, but my stomach twisted. Her laugh was too quick, too bright, like a light bulb flickering before it burns out. I let it go, but the doubt had taken root. By May, the doubt was a full-grown weed, choking out my peace of mind. Clara was still Clara, waking the kids with silly songs, leaving me post-it notes with doodled hearts. But there was a distance in her eyes, a space I couldn't cross. She'd started wearing makeup more often, even for quick errands, and her phone was never far from her hand. I told myself I was paranoid, that 16 years of marriage couldn't just unravel over a few late nights and a new dress. But then came the night that broke everything open. It was a Thursday, unseasonably warm, The kind of evening where Portland smells like pine and possibility. I was supposed to be at a site visit, but the client canceled last minute, so I headed home early. I stopped to grab takeout from our favorite Thai place, thinking I'd surprise Clara with pad CEW and a quiet night in. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was gone. The house was dark except for the porch light, which she always left on for me. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, I'm home early," I said, trying to sound casual. "Got Thai. Where you at?" No response. I texted her, then waited, the takeout bag growing cold on the counter. An hour later, I called again. Voicemail. By midnight, I was pacing, the kids asleep upstairs, my mind spinning through scenarios. Car accident, emergency meeting, a friend in crisis. At 1:17 a.m., her headlights swept across the living room window. I heard the front door creak open, her footsteps soft but deliberate, like she was trying not to wake anyone. "Clara?" I called from the couch, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. She jumped, her purse slipping from her shoulder. "Jesus, Tom, you scared me. What are you doing up? Site visit got canceled. Where were you?" Her hair was slightly mussed, her lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth. She was wearing that green dress again, but her jacket was buttoned wrong, like she'd thrown it on in a hurry. "I was at a client thing," she said, setting her purse on the table. "Lost track of time. Till 1 in the morning?" I stood, my hands clenching at my sides. "You didn't answer my calls, my texts, nothing." "My phone died," she said quickly. "I didn't realize it was so late. I'm sorry, okay?" I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to, but the air between us felt thick, heavy with something unsaid. "Who's Evan?" I asked, the name slipping out before I could stop it. Her eyes widened, just for a moment, then narrowed. "I told you he's a client. Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm not interrogating you, Clara. I'm asking where my wife was until 1 in the morning, why she's lying to me about it." "I'm not lying." Her voice cracked, and she turned away, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. "I'm tired, Tom. Can we not do this now?" But we did do it. For the first time in 16 years, we fought, really fought. Not about dishes or schedules, but about trust, about the space that had grown between us. She swore it was nothing, that I was blowing things out of proportion. I wanted to believe her, but the smudged lipstick, the misbuttoned jacket, the name Evan, they were pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up, a note on the counter saying she had an early meeting. I didn't believe it. I couldn't. So I did something I'd never done before. I checked her laptop. It was open on her desk, still logged in. A rookie mistake she'd never made before. My hands shook as I opened her email, telling myself I was just looking for proof she was telling the truth. Instead, I found a thread with Evan Carter, a name I didn't recognize beyond that text. The email started innocently, discussions about a logo, mock-ups, revisions. But as I scrolled, the tone shifted. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one said, dated 3 weeks ago. "You make me feel alive," said another. My chest tightened, each word a hammer against the life we'd built. I didn't confront her that day. I couldn't. I needed proof, something undeniable, because part of me still hoped I was wrong. So I started watching her more closely, noting her absences, her excuses. I tracked her phone's location once, when she said she was at a coffee shop working. The dot on the map was nowhere near a coffee shop. It was a bar downtown, one we'd never been to together. I drove there, parked across the street, and saw her through the window, laughing with a man I didn't know. He was tall, with dark hair and an easy confidence, his hand brushing hers as they shared a drink. I didn't go in. I drove home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the Thai food from weeks ago still sitting in my memory like a ghost. By the end of May, I had enough. Photos from a private investigator I hired, showing Clara and Evan at a hotel, her hand in his as they walked through the lobby. Text messages I'd pulled from her phone when she left it charging one night. Intimate, playful, nothing like the perfunctory text she sent me. A receipt for a necklace I'd never seen her wear, tucked in her purse, paid for by a credit card that wasn't ours. Each piece was a brick in a wall I couldn't unbuild. Clara, my Clara, was living another life, one where I didn't exist. The betrayal wasn't just about her being with someone else. It was the lies, the ease with which she'd slipped into them, the way she'd looked me in the eye and promised nothing was wrong. I thought of our kids, of Emma's science fair project I'd helped with, of Noah's soccer games where Clara cheered louder than anyone. I thought of the mornings we'd spent tangled in bed, planning our future, and the nights we'd stayed up talking about nothing and everything. 16 years, and she'd thrown it away for a man who made her feel alive. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Instead, something cold settled inside me, a resolve as unyielding as the steel I worked with. Clara had broken our trust, our family, our life, and I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I started planning, not just for confrontation, but for something more. A revenge that would make her feel the weight of what she'd done. A reckoning that would leave no doubt who she'd underestimated. The realization of Clara's betrayal didn't break me the way I expected. It didn't leave me sobbing or screaming, though there were nights when I sat alone in the garage, a bottle of bourbon in hand, staring at the tools on the wall as if they could fix what she'd shattered. Instead, it hardened something inside me, turned my heart into a blueprint, precise and unyielding. I wasn't the kind of man to let anger spill out in a burst of chaos. I was an engineer. I built things. And if Clara thought she could dismantle our life without consequence, I was going to build a response that would leave her reeling. The first step was gathering more evidence, not because I doubted what I'd seen, but because I needed it airtight. I'd already hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Ray who operated out of a cramped office downtown. Ray was discreet, efficient, and didn't ask questions beyond what was necessary. Over the next 2 weeks, he delivered a steady stream of photos, audio clips, and timelines. Clara and Evan at a wine bar, her head tilted back in laughter. Clara slipping into his car, a sleek black Audi that screamed money. Clara at a boutique hotel on the edge of the city, her arm looped through his as they disappeared into the lobby. Each image was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. But I didn't flinch. I filed them away, organized them by date and location, and kept my face neutral when Clara kissed me goodnight. I started digging into Evan Carter, too. He wasn't hard to find. A quick search on LinkedIn revealed he owned a chain of upscale coffee shops called Brew and Bloom, with locations across Portland and Seattle. He was 38, divorced, no kids, with a public persona that oozed charm, TED Talk vibes, all artisanal coffee and community impact. His Instagram was a curated grid of pour-over demonstrations, charity events, and him in tailored blazers, grinning like he'd cracked the code to life. I hated him instantly, not just for what he was doing with my wife, but for the way he seemed to float through the world, untouchable, while I was here picking up the pieces of his mess. I didn't confront Clara. Not yet. Confrontation would have been too easy, too quick, and she'd have spun it into a narrative where I was the jealous husband, overreacting to her friendship. No, I wanted her to feel the betrayal as deeply as I did, to understand the cost of her choices. I wanted Evan to feel it, too. So I started planning, and the plan wasn't about yelling or throwing punches. It was about precision, about dismantling their little fantasy brick by brick, the way Clara had dismantled our marriage. The first piece was financial. Clara's freelance income was sporadic, so we'd always shared a joint account for household expenses. I had access to her business account, too, since I'd helped her set it up years ago. I noticed small charges, dinners, hotel stays, a spa day, that didn't align with her client meetings. I cross-referenced them with Ray's reports and found matches. A $200 dinner at a French restaurant the night she'd claimed to be at a networking event. A $150 charge at a boutique in Northwest Portland the day after she'd bought that green dress. I didn't drain the account. That would have tipped her off. But I quietly moved half our savings into a new account in my name, citing tax purposes, when she asked about the transfer. She didn't push. She was too distracted, probably texting Evan while I cooked dinner for the kids. Next, I focused on Evan's business. Brew and Bloom was his pride and joy, the cornerstone of his identity. I started small, digging into public records, business licenses, health inspections, tax filings. It took some time, but I found a weak spot. One of his Portland locations, a cozy spot in the Pearl District, had a history of minor health code violations. Nothing major, but enough to raise eyebrows if someone tipped off the right people. I didn't stop there. I created anonymous accounts on review sites, posting detailed but plausible complaints about cleanliness, service, and off flavors in the coffee. I didn't flood the sites, that would have looked suspicious, but I spaced them out 1 or 2 a week from different IP addresses using a VPN. I watched the star ratings on Yelp and Google creep downward, just enough to make Evan sweat. Then there was the social angle. Evan's coffee shops thrived on their reputation as community hubs, places where hipsters and professionals mingled over oat milk lattes. I started showing up at the Pearl District location, not as Tom the Escot, but as a regular customer. I'd order a coffee, sit in a corner, and observe. I noted the staff, the customers, the vibe. I struck up conversations with regulars, planting subtle seeds of doubt, casual comments about hearing the place wasn't as clean as it used to be, or how the coffee tasted different lately. I didn't push too hard. I just let the whispers spread. One night, I overheard 2 baristas gossiping about a health inspector who'd shown up unannounced, citing an anonymous tip. They were rattled. Good. I also got to know Evan in a way. I created a fake Instagram account, posing as a small business owner interested in partnering with Brew and Bloom. I messaged him, flattered his ego, and got him talking about his expansion plans. He was cocky, dropping hints about a big investor meeting coming up, one that could fund a new location in Seattle. I filed that away too. Every detail was a tool, a lever I could pull when the time was right. At home, I kept up the facade. Clara and I were civil, even affectionate at times, though every touch felt like a lie. I cooked breakfast for the kids, helped with their homework, and smiled when Clara told me about her busy day. But I was watching. I noticed how she'd check her phone during dinner, how she'd linger in the bathroom with the door locked, probably texting him. I found a second phone in her studio, hidden in a drawer under a pile of sketch pads. It was a cheap burner, the kind you buy at a gas station. The call log was full of Evan's number. I didn't say a word. I just put it back and added it to my mental ledger. The kids were my anchor. Emma, 14, was starting to notice the tension, asking why Mom was always working. Noah, 10, was oblivious, still lost in his video games and soccer practice. I made sure they felt secure, that their routines stayed intact. But every night, after they were asleep, I'd sit at my desk, piecing together the next steps. I wasn't just going to expose Clara and Evan. I was going to make them pay, publicly, painfully, in a way that would leave scars. The centerpiece of my plan was the investor meeting. Ray had gotten me the details, date, time, location, even the names of the key players. It was set for a private room at a swanky downtown restaurant, the kind of place where deals were sealed over $50 stakes. Evan was pitching to a group of venture capitalists, hoping to secure $2 million for his Seattle expansion. I knew his type, image was everything. If I could humiliate him in front of those investors, make him look unreliable, untrustworthy, it would hit him where it hurt most: his ego and his wallet. I started by crafting a dossier. I compiled Ray's photos, the incriminating texts, even a few emails I'd pulled from Clara's laptop. I added public records showing Brew and Bloom's health code issues, screenshots of the negative reviews, and a timeline linking Evan's late nights to Clara's absences. I didn't just want to prove the affair. I wanted to paint him as a reckless, unprofessional liability. I used a burner email to contact one of the investors, posing as a concerned business associate. I sent a teaser, just enough to pique their interest, hinting at information that could impact their decision. I didn't send the full dossier yet. Timing was everything. I also worked on Clara's side of the equation. I knew her clients, her network, her reputation as a designer. She'd built a name for herself in Portland's creative scene, and she guarded it fiercely. I started laying groundwork to undermine that, too. I reached out to a few of her past clients, again anonymously, asking if they'd noticed inconsistencies in her billing or deadlines. I didn't accuse her outright, just planted doubts. Let them fester. One client, A boutique owner emailed back saying she'd always thought Clara's rates were high for the work. I saved that email, too. The hardest part was keeping it together at home. Clara was slipping further away, her lies more polished, her excuses smoother. She'd started wearing that necklace I'd found the receipt for. A delicate silver chain with a small emerald pendant. A gift from a client, she said when I asked. I nodded, said it was pretty, and swallowed the bile in my throat. I was biding my time, waiting for the moment when I could pull the trigger on both of them. By mid-June, the plan was nearly ready. The investor meeting was a week away. I had the dossier, the contacts, the leverage. I'd even started talking to a lawyer, quietly, about protecting my assets and custody of the kids. I wasn't going to let Clara walk away with half of everything. Not after this. But the final piece was personal. I wanted her to see the wreckage, to feel the weight of her choices. I decided the confrontation would happen the night of Evan's meeting, in a way that would leave no room for denials or deflections. I wanted her to look me in the eye and know she'd lost everything. As I finalized the details, I felt a strange calm. The man I'd been a year ago, the one who trusted blindly, who thought love was enough, had been replaced by someone colder, sharper, someone who understood that betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, and choices have consequences. The night of Evan's investor meeting was warm and humid, the kind of Portland evening where the air clung to your skin like a second shirt. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, each step calculated with the precision of a bridge blueprint. My anger had crystallized into something else, resolve, maybe, or something darker. I didn't care what it was called. All I knew was that Clara and Evan were about to face the consequences of their choices, and I was going to be the one to deliver them. I'd spent the day tying up loose ends. The dossier on Evan was complete, a damning collection of photos, texts, emails, and business records that painted him as a reckless philanderer and a shaky investment. I'd sent it to the lead investor, a woman named Margaret Voss, via an encrypted email from my anonymous account. I timed it to arrive just before the meeting, ensuring it would be fresh in her mind as Evan pitched his heart out. I didn't expect her to cancel the deal outright, but I knew she'd ask questions, poke holes, make him squirm. That was enough for now. At home, I kept up the facade. Clara was in her studio all morning, working on a project she claimed was due tomorrow. I didn't believe her, but I didn't push. Instead, I made pancakes for Emma and Noah, helped Noah with his math homework, and drove Emma to her art class. Clara barely looked up when I left, her fingers tapping furiously on her laptop. I wondered if she was messaging Evan, finalizing their plans for the night. The thought made my jaw clench, but I forced a smile and kissed her forehead before heading out. She didn't notice the edge in my eyes. By 6 p.m., I was ready. Clara had told me she was meeting a client downtown, a last-minute thing that might run late. I nodded, said I'd handle bedtime, and watched her leave in that green dress, the emerald necklace glinting at her throat. I knew where she was going, not to a client, but to Evan's meeting, probably to celebrate his big moment. Ray had confirmed it. Clara had been spotted at the restaurant before, waiting in the bar while Evan schmoozed. Tonight, she'd be there again. And so would I. The restaurant, Lucille, was a sleek, glass-walled place in the heart of downtown, all polished wood and candlelight. I'd booked a table in the main dining room under a fake name, close enough to the private room where Evan's meeting was happening, but discreet enough to avoid suspicion. I wore a dark blazer and glasses I didn't need, blending into the crowd of business types and date-night couples. Ray was there, too, stationed outside with his camera, ready to capture whatever unfolded. I arrived at 7:30, just as the meeting was starting. Through the frosted glass of the private room, I could see shadows moving. Evan's broad shoulders, the silhouettes of the investors. Clara wasn't in there. She was at the bar, sipping a martini, her back to me. She looked radiant, her curls catching the low light, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who danced with me in our dorm room to bad 90s pop. Then I saw the necklace, and the memory turned to ash. I didn't approach her. Not yet. Instead, I sipped my water and watched. At 8:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Ray. Voss just left the room. Looked pissed. I smiled into my glass. The dossier had done its job. I could imagine Evan stuttering through his pitch, trying to explain away the photos of him and Clara, the health code violations, the sinking Yelp reviews. Margaret Voss wasn't the type to invest in a liability, and Evan was unraveling. At 8:45, the private room door opened, and the investors filed out, their faces tight. Evan followed, his charm replaced by a forced smile. He glanced toward the bar, locking eyes with Clara. She stood, smoothing her dress, and started toward him. That was my cue. I stood, leaving cash on the table, and walked toward them. Clara saw me first, her face going pale, the martini glass trembling in her hand. "Tom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Evan turned, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition. He'd seen me in photos. I was sure, Clara's husband, the boring engineer who didn't suspect a thing. Now here I was, staring him down, my eyes cold as steel. "Clara," I said, ignoring him for the moment. "Funny running into you here. Thought you had a client meeting." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Evan stepped forward, his hand outstretched like we were at a networking event. "Hey, you must be Tom." "I'm Evan, Clara's." "I know who you are." I cut him off, my voice low but sharp. "And I know what you've been doing. Both of you." The restaurant seemed to quiet, though I knew it was just my focus narrowing. Clara's eyes darted to Evan, then back to me. "Tom, please, let's talk about this at home." "No," I said, stepping closer. "We're talking about it now, in front of your boyfriend." Evan's jaw tightened, but he tried to play it cool. "Look, man, I don't know what you think is going on, but save it," I snapped, pulling an envelope from my blazer. I handed it to Clara, who took it with shaking hands. "Open it." She hesitated, then tore it open. Inside were copies of the photos Ray had taken, her and Evan at the hotel, the bar, the Audi. There were screenshots of their texts, the ones where she told him she felt alive with him. There was even a copy of the necklace receipt, circled in red. Her face crumpled, tears welling up, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. "Tom, she started, but I held up a hand. "Don't. You don't get to explain. Not after months of lying to my face, to our kids." I turned to Evan, who looked like he wanted to bolt. "And you thought you could waltz into my life, take what's mine, and walk away clean? You're about to learn how wrong you were." I pulled out my phone and opened an email I drafted earlier, addressed to every major client in Clara's network and every business contact in Evan's. Attached was the dossier, edited to focus on their affair and his professional missteps. I hit send, watching their faces as the realization hit. Clara's clients would drop her. Portland's creative scene was tight-knit, and nobody liked a scandal. Evan's investors were already spooked. This would tank any chance of future funding. "You didn't," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "I did," I said, "and that's just the start." Evan lunged forward, his face red. "You can't do this, man. You're ruining everything." I didn't flinch. "You ruined it when you decided my wife was fair game." Before he could respond, Ray appeared at my side, his camera flashing. The diners around us were staring now, whispering. Evan froze, aware of the growing audience. Clara was crying openly, her hands clutching the envelope like it was a lifeline. I leaned in, my voice low so only they could hear. "You thought you could play me for a fool," I said. "You thought you could lie, sneak around, and I'd just take it. But I see you, Clara. I see both of you, and now everyone else will, too." I turned and walked out, leaving them in the wreckage. Ray followed, slipping me a USB drive with the night's photos and video. I didn't look back, but I could feel Clara's sobs, Evan's panic, the weight of their world collapsing. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. The next morning, I filed for divorce. I'd already consulted my lawyer, ensured the kids and I were protected financially. Clara moved out a week later to her sister's place, after I showed her the evidence I'd kept back, enough to guarantee I'd get primary custody if she fought me. She didn't. She was too broken, too humiliated. As her clients dropped her one by one, her reputation in tatters. Evan's business took a bigger hit. The investor meeting fell apart, and Brew and Bloom's ratings plummeted as more anonymous reviews surfaced. A health inspector shut down the Pearl District location for a week, citing violations I tipped them off about. I heard through Ray that Evan was scrambling to save his brand, but the damage was done. He was a pariah in Portland's business scene, his charm no match for the truth. I didn't stop there. I kept tabs on them, ensuring the consequences lingered. When Clara tried to rebuild her career, I made sure her new clients saw the dossier. When Evan pitched a new venture, I sent a polite, anonymous tip to his backers. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about justice, about making them carry the weight of their betrayal for as long as I'd carried it. The kids struggled, but I shielded them as best I could. Emma started therapy, and Noah threw himself into soccer. I rebuilt our home, piece by piece, filling it with new memories. Movie nights, camping trips, moments where we laughed without the shadow of Clara's lies. I didn't forgive her, and I never would. But I didn't need to. I'd taken back my life, my dignity, my family. And that was enough. As I sit on the porch tonight, the kids asleep upstairs, I think about Clara and Evan, somewhere out there, living with the ashes of their choices. I don't smile, but I don't hurt either. I'm free, and they'll never be.